Hey everybody, we're live. We're back, and it is 10:50 in the East, 7:50 in Oakland, which means whatever time it would be in Hawaii, it's whatever time. What in Hawaii? I believe it would be what 4 o'clock, 4:50. All right, good enough, folks. The man at the bottom is the legendary Bill Carroll. He's covered how many NFL drafts? 20 years, something like that. Bill, 25 years.
I've covered several in person going back to like 2003, I guess was when I covered in person. And then I've covered them, just sort of through other means going back to 1983, I guess was the first one I wrote about for the Answer newspaper in my hometown.
Right. I remember this man when he had dreadlocks.
Yes. And a 29-inch waist, but both are gone.
There you go. And we have the newly legendary Vinny Espinosa.
Hello, guys. Hey, what's up?
Yeah, from Hofstra University, and gracing our presence once again. And then, of course, there's
anyway, the man in the mirror himself. You, of course.
Thank you. Now, we had a legendary time yesterday, and we're going to reprise that. But we're going to have a different order with Bill Carroll going first, Vinny going second, and me going last. So without any further ado, Mr. Carroll, the Jacksonville Jaguars.
Jacksonville Jaguars. And so Jacksonville got Trevor Lawrence and let me see. I'm sure who else they got last time.
We got Trevor Lawrence last time. I chose him last time.
Right. Okay. And is that the only pick they had in the first?
No. The Jags don't forget they had the Rams first round pick as well.
That's what I was saying. I thought they had another pick. They have Trevor Lawrence and who else?
It was I don't know. Like I'm just remember it was we'll worry about that later. Like
okay, I'm trying to sort of think of what they still have on the board. Well, I guess I'll just go with best player available as opposed to worrying about what they picked already. So what I will do.
Oh, by the way, we started round one again.
Oh, we're going round one again?
Yeah.
Oh, I thought we were picking up. Okay, well that changes. Oh,
right. Primarily because we had so much difficulty before, and then
Oh, okay. Well, then let me reconfigure my thought process. Well, then come on down, the pride of Cartersville, Georgia, yet again. Okay. I was completely thinking we were picking in round two now. Okay. So, no, instead it is Trevor Lawrence yet again. Okay, got it.
That brings us to you, Mr. Espinosa, and the New York Jets.
Well, when I'm looking at the Jets, you don't have Sam Darnold anymore. You shipped him off to Carolina. They'll worry about their own quarterback situation down over there. But here in New York, we know they're taking a QB. I mean, they sucked for Sam last time. Now, so what's the motto now? So you can't do tank for Trevor because you couldn't do that. So, maybe you want to sit back, just put on the old read all the Book of Mormon, and following the roots of fellow Mormon in Steve Young, you decide, hey, the Jets, our logos look somewhat similar. Maybe it won't matter that much. I'm messing around. I'm taking Zach Wilson. He's the most likely one. I've seen him in so many mock drafts, and everyone thinks it's going to be Zach Wilson at this point.
Okay, so number 3, I'm taking Justin Fields. That leaves us with Bill Carroll at number 4 for the Falcons.
Okay, so the Falcons are hoping they will not be this bad again for a while. So this may be their best chance to get a shot at taking someone who will eventually take the reins of the offense from Matt Ryan. So the selection will be. And, of course, he doesn't play right away because Matt Ryan's not ancient, but he's clearly on the backside of his career. So Trey Lance from North Dakota State University will be the pick.
That'd be great. That'd be great for Atlanta. They would absolutely love that. And No, as you know, I love Ryan a lot, but at the same time, like I would have no issue taking them here. I think that's a really good pick, especially like 4 quarterbacks in a row. I can see it.
Bengals.
Bengals. I know a lot of these. I know a lot of Bengals fans, and I can tell you right away, they're I don't know, they could really go either Chase or Sewell, and I'm kind of I'm contemplating back and forth about this. On the one hand, you could say for Chase, you could have a nice weapon for Burrow. But on the other side, you could say Sewell because the offensive line has been very very bad in the years past. But they got Riley Reef. They added you still have Jonah Williams, but at the same time, it's Sewell. Okay, I'm taking Penny Sewell here out of Oregon. It's the best choice. He's the best player on the board.
All right, so Sewell goes to the Bengals. I'm sending Kyle Pitts once again to the Dolphins. That leaves Detroit Lions at number 7, and that leaves us with Mr. Carroll.
Okay. So the Lions are absolutely thrilled over the moon to find that Kyle Pitts is somehow still available.
No, he was just taking.
Oh, okay. Oh, well then. So, but that means Chase is available then.
Yeah.
Oh, well then they're still over the moon. There's either way they're over the moon. Jamar Chase gives them the best receiving prospect they have had in almost 20 years. You have to go all the way back to probably Megatron, Calvin Johnson. The last time they had a true top tier number 1 type receiver. So,
hey Bill, let me ask you as the resident expert here, why is Jamar Chase that much better than the Heisman Trophy winner?
Sure. There's 2 real reasons. One is the ability to win at the catch point, even when somebody is right all over you. Now, the things I like about DeVonta Smith is he's extremely crafty, and his way of beating the jam is to essentially disappear like a ghost, poof, right? Not be there when you try to put his hands on it. And Chase also can do that. He's a good enough athlete to make people miss, but he's also strong enough. And this is where he has the advantage over a guy like Smith. He can muscle people. People have compared him to Des Bryant, but he's a much better route runner than Des Bryant was at this point in development. And he's a better pure athlete than Des Bryant was, faster and quicker, though not as big. But he's big enough and strong enough. He's going to play about 211 pounds probably or so throughout his career. He drops some weight, like guys usually do, to run fast. And he'll run fast enough even once he puts the weight back on. And I'm a big fan of both. Like I like Smith a great deal as well. And I had previously Smith ahead, but I did more work on Chase. And you know how it is. So when a guy doesn't play, you sort of lose a little bit of what it was you liked about them. And I went back and watched 6 games of Chase from 2019. I was like, oh yeah, that's right. The player he most reminds me of is Sterling Sharp. And I don't say that lightly.
Oh, nice.
I don't say that lightly because I love Sterling Sharp. He has some Eric Moulds and some Sterling Sharp to him in that he's a fairly thickly built guy, but extremely elusive and powerful. And once again, a very good route runner, tracks the ball beautifully. And both he and Smith both track the ball beautifully. Mm-hmm. But like I said, the difference is just pure physical strength. They're very close together in a lot of things, but Chase is just equally fast, if not faster, but also stronger.
Hey, so you know what? I just checked. Devonta is clocked in as running the 40 at 4.27. Chase at 4.38.
Well, no, I mean that 4.27 is theoretical because he didn't actually run.
What do you mean?
He didn't work out.
Where did the number come from? Somebody's guess?
I guess. I mean, I watched the pro day. He didn't work out. So I don't know what you want me to tell you.
So how come when I type Devonta Smith 40 time in Google, it comes up in big letters?
Sure. Now pull up his pro day and see what it says.
Well, that's different. My point is, that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying, where the fuck did that number come from?
It comes from lots of places. Like, where does like, where does Deion Sanders' number come from? Like,
I don't know. I want to know. I'm asking you a question. If you
I'm
don't,
saying it
you don't
is.
know.
It is
I want to know where
speculation.
it came
Right.
from.
I answered the question. It's idle speculation, Zennie. So I tell you what it comes from.
Show me that it's idle speculation.
Because the only time he's ever been timed electronically was at a rivals camp years ago, and it was nowhere close to 4.27. Now, it is. We can say theoretically he's gotten faster, right? But there is not a reliable time on him. Is what I'm telling you.
So somebody just basically was drunk and they put in 4.2.
I can neither confirm nor deny whether they were impaired or not. I'm telling you, he didn't work out. So any number that people are putting out there is speculative. That's what I'm telling you.
Here's the answer. Okay, wait a minute.
Interesting.
Somebody put in something here that reads, it says, how fast can Devonta Smith, and I'm saying this to buttress what I'm presenting. Wow, that takes away from the screen. That's not fair. So I can't do it there. It's from TDA. How fast can Devonta Smith run the 40-yard dash? Fans may never know.
Exactly.
March 23rd by Stephen Smith. And he writes, basically, he said he would not participate in the pro day, as we know, as you said. And he said he would Ray, and what's the burning question? The trouble is that when you Google this, it comes up in big letters 4.27, but then this is what it reads. And perhaps then we need to correct Google on it because this is a problem.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. So here's what I would tell you, the things I actually know.
That's cool. Okay.
Because these are actual times from his track career in high school. He did run his personal record in the 100 is 10.67. His personal record in the 200 meters is 22.45. His personal record in the 400 is 49.34. And his best triple jump, which I believe won state, or Lincoln would have won state one year, was 45 and 3.5 inches.
Wait, stop the press. Didn't he work out last year at the combine?
No, because you can't do that. In basketball, they'll let you do that, but you can't do that in football, my friend.
No, I'm saying there was something's going on about, oh, you know what it was here? I see the problem. All right. This is truly, wow. This is a gigantic error. You know what they did?
They did.
Because I was there when this happened. They took Henry Ruggs' time. That's why it looks so familiar to me. This is Henry Ruggs' time at the combine.
Yeah, right. Well, right, as I was saying. And somebody speculated or guessed or whatever it is.
No, what they did, it wasn't even that. This is a child of Google's screwed up algorithm. The algorithm took two Alabama wide receivers, slammed them together. So if you type Devonta Smith 4.27 40 time, you get, or just 40 time, you get Henry Ruggs 40 time.
Well,
that's an issue.
Well,
That's an issue.
My point is that Devonta Smith is fast, and we have proof of it because he was a very good track athlete. But we have no idea what his actual 40 time is. My guess is it's probably in the low 4.4s or high 4.3s, which is more than fast enough.
But here's the thing: why would if he's that fast, why would he not run?
Who knows? Probably because his agent said you don't have to. Right? You're going to go, here anyway.
Wow. Hey, Sean's in the hospital. I'm glad you're making your. See, this is our value to folks. See, John, Lions should go with Surtain, keep up with Okuda, and get the best available wide receiver later in the draft. Last year, Justin Jefferson slipped to the Vikings second round. All right, so we are in the middle of an interesting conversation, but still the Lions have not officially picked, or have they?
Yeah, they did. They took Jamar Chase. What are we talking about? I mean, where did you? I said they were thrilled to find him still there.
That's true. That was the old Abraham mental burp there. A mental burp that was created by the fact that I was dying to have this conversation about Devonta Smith and how he managed to get devalued. That's the other question still in my mind, Bill. How if Chase is so much better, supposedly, than Smith, how did Smith emerge as the Heisman Trophy winner?
It's very, very odd. I mean, I assume it's probably because like.
Well, we just said Jamar Chase didn't play. He sat out. That's an easy one. Move on.
Okay, so because he didn't play, we're basically taking a flyer on him.
Well, he was absolutely dominant the last time we saw him play, and he tested through the roof.
And that was 2020.
2019.
Okay. That doesn't scare you?
Not that much. Not at that position. At quarterback, it would scare the daylights out of me.
Wow. And how was his pro day?
Great. Fan freaking tastic. He had a great pro day.
Okay. Wow. This is going to be an interesting year. I mean, I think that's an understatement because I think there are going to be a lot of mistakes made. Woo! Okay, number 8, Carolina Panthers. That leaves us with Vinny.
The Panthers are a team that needs help on trenches, and considering that, you have Sam Darnold there, he's probably going to be your quarterback. I'm taking Rashawn Slater just like how Bill did last time because I think that's a perfect fit for them as a tackle because I think if they could really use it at this position, and this is a really good pickup for Carolina.
Okay, I'm going to say that I'm going to send Patrick Surtain to the Broncos. That's easy.
Yeah, they definitely need some help at corner.
Yeah, and that leaves us with the Dallas Cowboys at number 10, and that leaves us to Bill Carroll.
Okay, excellent. And for people talking about Justin Jefferson, he didn't make it to the second round. He was picked 22nd overall, so he did go in the first. But getting back to the draft, so Surtain being gone means that J.C. Horn is definitely the pick.
J.C. Horn, got it. That leaves us to New York Giants, and that leaves us to with Mr. Espinosa. Is your name it's Italian, but is there a meaning behind your name or a history there? I'm sure it is.
Honestly, to tell the truth, I actually have no idea what my last name actually translates to in English. I've never asked my parents that. I've always been kind of curious, but I never really went into the deep history about it. So I know it's Italian. I know that on my dad's side of the family, it's from Naples.
Yeah.
So it's probably from there. So it's around like the Neapolitan area. That's where the name comes from.
Yeah. Okay.
So as for the Giants, this is the team that I did grow up with. This is a team that I know that in the past was really, really good for their big blue wrecking crew with their pass rushers, and I think the Giants as an organization and as a team could really use that. So I'm going to take Aziz here from Georgia.
Oh wow!
Woo! Okay. That's the highest he's went. Woo!
Yeah, that's wow. That's a big one. That'll have people running for the running for several things. But yeah, he's a very gifted, pure athlete, and he'll need some coaching up, but he's got some attributes that you don't.
I can see the Giants traded back from this pick too. Like, for instance, if like Mac Jones or any of the quarterbacks are still available, I'm
sending Devonta Smith to the Eagles.
Oh yeah, that's dog. That's a very easy move. It's like don't just put up, shut up, and just do it kind of choices.
They would be thrilled if he were indeed available at that point.
Especially if your division rival decides to pass up on him.
You don't think he's going to be available at that 12?
It's going to be tight. The teams that could conceivably pull the trigger on him. So if instead of Sewell going at 5, if instead Chase goes at 5, and if then you saw somebody decide it's possible that I doubt this, but it's possible that the Dolphins could decide they prefer Devontae Smith. Smith could go as early. That's the earliest I could see him going. And then I think the Giants probably pull the trigger on him. But Azeez Ojulari is in a weak-ish pass rusher group, I could see him getting pushed up the board.
That high though?
I don't think he goes that high, but I could see him getting pushed up the board.
So wait, number 13, the Chargers, and that falls to me, if I'm not mistaken. And San Diego.
Los Angeles.
Thank you very much, San Diego. Yeah, San Diego.
Superchargers.
I just had to get that out, folks.
I can't blame you.
Oh my lord. Okay, Jalen Waddle. I don't believe they're going to let sit there at 13, and he becomes a Charger. And offense sells tickets.
Defense wins championships.
Yeah, even though they have a defensive specialist, I don't think he's going to pass on Waddle at 13, which leaves us now to the Minnesota Vikings at 14, and that leaves us to Mr. Wow.
Yeah, Christian Darrisaw. They're a team that likes offensive balance. They want to run the ball and obviously also pass it as well, especially off of play action. And Christian Darrisaw is a tremendous asset in the run game. He is a terrific blocker.
Mm-hmm. John Key was here for the Raiders pick. Hang on. I don't get. Hey, John. I don't
Patience.
Get
Patience, folks. Patience.
I don't get for the Raiders this time out. Sorry, but I don't. But anyway, okay. So Darrisaw. Now the Patriots are in the capable hands of Vinny Lospinoso. Vinny, you're next.
Mac Jones is there. How can you not pass? How can you pass up on him now? Especially considering that Cam Newton has a 1-year deal. You don't know what you have in Jarrett Stidham. And although you have Cam Newton there, and you could say you could take someone that has Cam Newton's skill set and build him for the future. Well, let's not forget Tom Brady was there for 2 decades. Don't you think they would want to match up someone that fits better with his original skill set? I mean, Mac Jones to the Patriots, easy decision here.
You know what though, folks? I don't think it's a decision Bill Belichick's going to make. I think if Mac Jones is there, Mac Jones gets passed. I don't think Bill Belichick pulls that trigger that high.
I was actually thinking that, back in 2018, that I was hoping that he pulled the trigger on Lamar Jackson, but that didn't happen. So I figured that maybe Mac Jones can be taken here, but it really depends. Honestly, it really just depends on how the quarterbacks are taken. Like Mac Jones, I could see, but if things get really, really lucky, I could see Justin Fields going
there. Next, I don't see them getting a quarterback there. I don't care who it is. I just don't. And Fields is not going to fall that far. That's not.
Well, that's why I see him trading up.
Yeah, but I don't see them taking a quarterback. I just don't. 16 comes to me. All right. Yeah, one of my favorite teams, Arizona Cardinals, have spent time building their defense and getting some real interesting pickups. But I believe at this stage, there's a running back they're going to not let sit on the board, and they're going to take Najee Harris.
Ooh.
Yeah. Najee Harris.
Bold. I like it, though.
That would be a fantastic pickup for their offense.
It'd be bold, but I like it. Nice, very physical of a team. Even though one could say you could take running backs later, you choose the best player on your board. In the case of the Cardinals, at least if you were running them,
that's a great point, Vinny. But I wouldn't have done that were it not for his pass catching abilities.
That's true. He is someone that can do. He's a very versatile individual in the backfield as well as a receiving option. So, he's an all-around kind of guy, and people want to take running backs that can do a bit of everything because they have a lot more value as a player.
Even if he catches a flat pass, as we've seen, you have to pay attention to him.
Mm-hmm. Definitely.
He's a bona fide weapon. I would be very excited to see him in the Cardinal and white. Now we come to the Raiders. The Raiders in the hands.
In the hands of you, Bill.
Yes, and many times I've pointed out that they have the good other rusher, the guy who would be, essentially Robin to someone's Batman. So in Max XX Crosby, they have their Robin. Now they're finally getting their Batman at the pass as a pass rusher in Jalen Phillips, who's the best pure pass rusher in the entire draft class.
Ah, okay. So I have to scroll down a bit to get him. Mr. Phillips is not imminently available.
Yeah, Jalen Phillips was the #1 prospect overall coming out of high school.
Yeah, who's that cat that runs that's a defensive end who runs a 4.36 40?
Well, once again, it's a 4.36.
4.36. You're putting air quotes there. You're concerning me.
Just to remind everyone, there was no combine. These are pro day numbers. So I always adjust those numbers. But yes, in the person of Kwity Paye, we had a pretty crazy, for lack of a better way of describing it, pro day. And yeah, he had a pretty crazy pro day. Like he did some things you don't normally see from someone his size. He's a freakish individual. He was one of the people that Bruce Feldman had on his freaks list. He had 36 bench reps. He had a great day. And then the other guy who had a ludicrous workout is Jason Oweh. Now, ironically, those are also two of the more unformed, for lack of a way of putting it, pass rushers in the class. Guys that are exciting players and fun to watch, but they don't really understand how to close the deal as pass rushers. So you're going to have to do some
coaches for.
Well, right. I mean, but we say that all the time about lots of guys. You know what I mean? Like, and you get guys that sometimes it works out for. Like, a good example would be Daniel Hunter, right? I mean, that Daniel Hunter worked out for.
But let's start with Micah Parsons, Patrick. This literally just happened.
But that's the exception, not the rule. And so there were a lot of very fast times. Jason Oweh was the one that ran the 4.36. Micah Parsons ran the 4.39. There was a lot of, but those are. I am mentally adjusting all those numbers by about 0.8 of a second. Now, 4.44 is still ludicrously fast from a 257-pound human being. But those are not numbers that you would get in a combine situation.
Well, okay. So Jalen Phillips is the man who's selected to be the Raiders' edge rusher. And I think overall it seems like at 17, the Raiders are definitely going to go for a defensive line person, eh?
They certainly should.
Yeah.
Their defense failed them a bit last year. They could really use some help there.
No, they could definitely. I mean, oh gosh, I'm not sold on Gus Bradley, but whatever, that's another story.
Yeah, that's a whole other story, right?
Yeah.
But one of the things that makes Gus Bradley's system work is the ability to get consistent pressure without blitzing.
Just don't ask him to coach the team in case Gruden gets
Well, right. But one of the things that makes that system go, when they were at their best, in addition to having all those great guys in the secondary, the Legion of Boom, and Bam Bam Cam and Richard Sherman and Earl on the back half, was they had the interior rush consistently coming from Bennett. And even though they didn't have any superstar pass rushers, they had guys who consistently gave you at least upfield pressure, even though they weren't, we're not talking about Myles Garrett types or Von Miller types. But they managed to get consistent pressure, and that's what you need. Yeah, well, that is the thing that we worried about. He actually had medically retired at one point. He managed to play all of last year without suffering a concussion, despite having a bunch of them previously, a couple in high school and a couple in his career at UCLA. You're going to have to be very careful and monitor his reps and, monitor even his usage in practice. But he's a gifted player. There's nobody else in this draft class who understands, both as a physical ability and actually a plan of action of how to get to the quarterback, which is what separates him from people like Oweh and Paye, who, once again have great ability to get upfield and penetrate, but don't know how to get to the quarterback.
Who would you compare him to in terms of the defensive ends in history?
In history, okay. That's a great question.
Yeah, I'm thinking about guys like
of the guys that I've watched over the past however many years, many years, the guys that he's most like in terms of how he does it, the way he looks, the way he moves. He reminds me a bit of guys like, he's more sudden, more explosive than a guy like Art Still, but he has he has very long arms like Still did. But he has he's slipperier, right? He's a quicker guy, and he's got tremendous ability to change direction. Another guy that he just sort of comes to mind when I watch him play, even though people don't often make cross-racial comparisons, but a little bit like the Shobles, right? Remember, and he's obviously a better player, but similar way of winning as Aaron Schobel had, just more productive, right? He's a better, more productive version, a more explosive, more productive version of a guy like Schobel, or a guy like let me see who else is somewhat like him, or even a more polished version of. I just talked about Danielle Hunter. He's very similar physically, but unlike Danielle Hunter, who was this very, very raw player, he's ready to go. He actually has a plan and knows how to execute. He knows how to get to the quarterback.
All right. So David Compton is here. He says,
Hey, Dave.
Yeah. Oh, one moment, guys. Yeah.
Yes, we did, Dave. We talked about the 49ers back at the number 3 pick. We had him taking Justin Fields.
Yeah. And Gus Bradley never costs.
Gus Bradley never coached a defense this bad. Yeah, usually the good thing about Gus Bradley teams, that a big reason why he was hired by the Jaguars was because he coached the Legion of Boom. You're going to have to improve that edge rush. Speaking of the pass rush, speaking of edge rushers, I'm going to go Kwity Paye here for the Dolphins, because I feel like they could really use, their answer to Cameron Wake, who one could say, Jason Taylor, Cameron Wake, Kwity Paye. That's a nice 1-2-3. Well, 1-2-3 throughout your history of premier edge rushers, whether it be Hall of Fame, Hall of really good, or potentially either or. Who knows what could happen?
Has there ever been a better first round? I'm sorry, Vinny, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No problem.
I was just going to ask, guys, has there ever been a better first round for edge rushers than this first round?
Well, you mean in the history of the game? Yes.
Yeah, of course. There definitely has. The thing with also, too, is that we need to also see how these guys play. Like, we can look in history and see, the 1983 draft was so good, or, the 2004 draft was so good. But also, keep in mind, the reason why those drafts are also good is because those players were also extremely phenomenal at their position.
Now, what year was better in terms of edge rusher talent?
I don't know. I got to really look back on that.
Well, there have been a few. I think the ones that stand out. Well, I guess we can start with the legendary 1983 draft, which just had everything in it. That was just a loaded draft. If we're just talking the history of NFL drafts,
but I specifically asked.
Yeah.
Has there ever been a first round that had more better edge rushers than this one? First round, not the whole draft, the first round.
That's an interesting question. Probably. I'd have to think about. Well, let's think about this since you asked it.
My answer is no. My answer is no. Straight up no. Because you're going down the line, picking off these guys that are phenomenal athletes. They're running incredible times, and they're defensive ends. Okay.
Right, but that doesn't mean they'd be great players necessarily. I know what you're saying.
That's not what I'm talking about. I am specific. I'm very specific in my question.
Okay.
I'm talking about defensive ends drafted in the first round in terms of number. So
you're just talking about what's the highest number of defensive end or pass rusher types to go in the first round?
I'm saying that this one's going to set the record.
We'll see.
I'm laying it out there. I'm saying I'm just staking my foot in the ground, whatever you want to call it, and I'm saying this is it. I have never seen a draft like this. I mean, it's like these guys are growing on trees. This is not funny. You know, if you can't find a starting edge rusher out of this group, you can't coach. Period. End of story. You can't. This is amazing. And now
It is really, really talented. I can't wait for the draft. This makes it even funner.
This is freaking crazy. Okay.
Yeah, definitely.
Washington football team at the 19th pick. And well, I still feel they need a quarterback, but
Oh, speaking of the football team, did you hear that apparently they released like a name of all the finalists that they've had for like a names? And yes, Red Tails was, I think, included in that, along with some weird ones like the Washington Royals or the Washington Rubies, like the gemstone, like the ace.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I'm liking the Red Tails name even more. I've seen Commanders in there. Besides what do you think, Bill? What do you think they should call Washington as a new team?
Well, I'd be
the new name.
Yeah, I'd be thrilled if they chose Red Tails. It would be obviously historic, and I'm a big fan of history. It would be reflective of the fact that, you know, Washington, D.C. is a city that is deeply steeped in Black history. And it would be a nice reversal of some of the things that have happened in that franchise's previous history in terms of racial, you know, inequities and just horrible racism that used to surround the team. So it would be at least a fun and interesting thing, you know, if they could somehow get that turned around.
Micah Parsons is on the Washington football team.
Nice.
And primarily because I believe that helps them continue the building of their front seven, where they started off last year with some phenomenal additions. And I can't wait to see what he does if that were to happen. Chicago Bears at number 20. That brings us to Mr. Carroll.
Okay, so I believe that.
Come on, Bill.
Yep.
Trade all your drafts and bring us a quarterback.
Yeah, well,
Andy Dalton, is that okay?
yeah, quarterback's not really something that's readily available at this point in the draft, quite frankly. In terms of value, it would make some sense. What would make really good sense in terms of value, in fact, it would make perfect sense in terms of value, would be Greg Newsome. I think Greg Newsome is going to be a star. He is a complete cornerback. The ceiling for him is Rod Woodson level in terms of what he could be.
That's a pretty high ceiling.
It's an extremely high ceiling. Yes.
Yeah, folks, for those of you who are wondering regarding quarterbacks still available, in order of talent, you have Kellen Mond of A&M, Davis Mills, who I believe is one of the best. I think he's better than Mond. Davis Mills, Kyle Trask.
No relation to Amy.
Nope, thank you. Felipe Franks, Shane Buechele, Ian Book, ranked 267, KJ Costello, and as we go down, Sam Ellinger, Peyton Ramsey, Brady White, Kevin Thompson, Zach Thomas, Brady Davis, Noah Johnson, David Moore, and Zach Smith out of Tulsa, ranked number 423. So for those of you wondering which quarterbacks are out there,
Zach Smith is a former Baylor quarterback who transferred to Tulsa.
Yeah. Now, I apologize because number 20, you had said, again, Mr. Carroll.
Gregory Newsome II from Northwestern University.
Gregory Newsome II is now with the Colts. Now, the Bears. We are turning to the Colts at number 21, which brings us to Mr. La Spinosa.
The Colts are a team that just lost Anthony Costanzo, and considering that Carson Wentz is a player that is kind of reckless in terms of the way he runs and also his injury history, Give me a Cosme out of Texas to fill the space that Casanzo has left.
Okay. One moment, please. We're just making a technical adjustment here before we go that. And then, all right. So, okay. And we'll go back and do this little house cleaning. And now we will then repeat that again, please.
Samuel Cosme.
Got it. Right here. Just like before. All right.
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense. I mean, it's an
Yeah,
easy
no,
pick.
I agree with you. I agree. It's amazing to see how this plays out. That leaves us with the Titans at 22, which comes to me. And I believe that Elijah Vera Tucker is a solid choice for them at guard at 22. I was toying with going with linebacker or defensive tackle, but I'm also, in thinking about the Titans, I'm struck with the number of high caliber first round offensive linemen they've had a tradition of drafting. And you build champions on the line. So of course I could have went defense, but I'm just intrigued by having a Mr. Tucker as the guard there.
Mm-hmm.
All right. That leaves us to Bill Carroll.
Okay, let's see. So this is the Jets again.
T-E-S. Jets. I'm sure Vinny's texting something to you. Just kidding.
Not this time.
Best players available. Start with Jeremiah Owusu
Koromoa from Bethel High School in beautiful Hampton, Virginia. Then we've got Christian Barmore, Rashad Bateman, Etienne, Jimmy Davis, SSI. So what I think I will do is with this selection. Surtain's gone. I will go with Jason Oweh, Penn State. Even though he's super, 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 super raw, he is a special athlete. And we trust our coaches, so coach him up.
All right. The Steelers are at 24, and I am going to bring them Travis Etienne from Clemson.
Wait.
Oh, did I go out of school?
Yeah.
I did it again. Sorry.
Nah. It's okay. I'll take the Jaguars here.
Okay.
Okay. As for what I would do with the Jaguars, well, you took your quarterback of the future. Okay. Now, what do you do as an organization? It's simple. You try to build around him the best you can. So right here, I decided to take Tevin Jenkins out of Oklahoma State. That's who I would do.
Solid pick.
And Bill would come to the Browns, which is you since I went out of school.
Okay. So, this is very exciting for the Browns. Things have worked out pretty much exactly as they'd hoped. So the selection will be Zaven Collins.
Oh,
and an incredibly versatile linebacker who can do literally everything. And on top of that, he's a brilliant individual who plans to become a doctor when he's done with playing football.
And that brings the Ravens, and I love to see Barmore as a Raven. Outstanding addition to their defense. Now we come to number 28, and that the Saints are marching in.
The Saints are marching in, and they decided that, they need to improve upon the corners, especially considering the loss of Janoris Jenkins. And I would say also because, I think Lattimore, this is the final year of his deal. I mean, I know he's up for a contract extension, but in case, you also got to make sure that, whether he's there or not, you also want to improve upon, your corners. And I say, take Tito Barley here out of Virginia Tech. That would be nice.
Okay.
Easy decision there.
So the Packers, Mr. Carroll.
So this is going to be an interesting situation. The Packers obviously need to finally go ahead and address the wide receiver position. And it looks like things have fallen in their favor because Rashad Bateman is still available. Excellent. So bring him on.
Finally, at long last, he gets a weapon. It took him, 16, 17 years?
Since Randall Cobb, they had a nice little run there with both Randall Cobb and Jordy Nelson, but it's been a minute.
I mean a first round pick, Bill.
Oh yeah. No. They don't really invest first round picks in wide receiver almost ever.
Is Jordan Love ever going to get a chance to play?
Hopefully not.
All right.
That is unless they decide potentially to trade him to another team and make Jordan Love their starter. But honestly, who knows at this point?
So the Bills are number 30, Joseph Asai, edge rusher.
Yep.
And
easy decision there.
Very.
That leaves us to the Chiefs. And
a lot of beep.
Finally, the Bucks.
As for the Kansas City Chiefs, you let Eric Fisher go. You let Mitchell Schwartz go. Schwartz, a guy who I think personally this might be a bit of a stretch considering the number of All-Pros. You might consider him for Canton, but that might be a bit of a stretch. But we need to see if he gets signed by someone first. But going with the Chiefs, the reason why they lost that Super Bowl was because you were losing both of your tackles, and the Buccaneers pass rush was putting pressure on Mahomes, especially with his bad foot, as much as possible. So there's no way you can't go tackle here if you're a team like the Chiefs. And I would say, give me Jalen Mayfield out of Michigan here. I feel like, he did play at the right side, but don't forget the stronger side of the two was Mitchell Schwartz as the right tackle compared to Eric Fisher. So I think it could be fine. I would say this is a good move. He can play either left or right. He can be a swing guy for you.
So you said Jalen Mayfield?
No, I know. Jalen. I said Jalen Mayfield, yeah.
Okay.
It might be a bit lower down here.
We'll have to go way down to get him.
He's a lot lower than I thought. Oh, there he is.
What? I just went right by him?
No, he's just down a little more.
Okay, hold on.
This guy that I can think to play, nice at the position. Lots of right.
Let's see here.
There he is, number 70.
Hired. And finally, Bill Carroll is in control of the Buccaneers' destiny.
Fascinating. Okay, so this is always fun when you are picking for a team that doesn't actually have any, glaring, desperate, oh my God, we're going to do type needs. So there are still several very good players left. Now the question is, which one do we want? I believe I will go with a player who's very similar, even down to his Haitian heritage, to a player that we drafted several years ago who worked out just fine for us. So obviously Jason Pierre-Paul is someone who's one day going to be in the Ring of Honor here in Tampa. Here's someone who is an incredibly similar player, similar in terms of body type, like I said, Haitian heritage, playing style. Gregory Rousseau, University of Miami.
Boom. And full results. We have Trevor Lawrence, Clemson, headed to the Jaguars. Zach Wilson, BYU, headed to the Jets. 49ers take Justin Fields. Falcons take Trey Lance. Jimmy Sewell is a Bengal. Kyle Pitts is a Dolphin. Jamar Chase, Lions. Rashawn Slater, Panthers. Patrick Surtain, Broncos. J.C. Horn, Cowboys. Azeez Ojulari, Giants. Devonta Smith, Eagles. Jalen Waddle, Chargers. Christian Darrisaw, the Minnesota Vikings. Mac Jones, Patriots. Najee Harris, Cardinals. Jalen Phillips, Raiders. Kwity Paye, Michigan. Micah Parsons going to the Dolphins. Because Micah Parsons from Penn State going to the Washington football team. The Bears get Greg Newsome II. The Colts pick up Samuel Conti. The Titans get Elijah Vera Tucker. The Jets clock in with Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah. The Steelers add Travis Etienne from Clemson.
Another Haitian kid.
Stephen Jenkins becomes a Jacksonville Jaguar. The Cleveland Browns add linebacker Zaven Collins. The Ravens add Christian Barmore, defensive tackle out of Alabama. Caleb Farley, the cornerback of VT, is going to the Saints. Rashad Bateman, wide receiver, is going to the Packers. Joseph Asai, defensive end, Buffalo Bills. Jalen Mayfield, offensive tackle from Michigan, is a Chief. And finally, Gregory Rousseau, edge rusher. He is going to Miami. Hey, is there a way to save these, or do I just add them? Or
there is a way to save them if you have an account, like if you create an account.
Right. But I thought you had to create an account to start these. So apparently,
not if it's the PFN one, or I think it's PFN you're using. You can just pop on and just do that without having an account. But to stack or save or whatever, archive, you'll need that. So we were talking about
actually, I realized, I've already saved this by reading this off on video, so we're cool.
Well, there you go. So we were talking about draft classes in terms of pass rushers. Now there was a draft class. Now, obviously, we can go back through history and eventually search on them. There were only 4 guys who went in the first round who were pass rushers, but 2 of them, the first 2 are guys who are going to be in the Hall of Fame. In 2002, you had Julius Peppers, and then 9 picks later, you had Dwight Freeney. So that was a pretty decent class of pass rush types. Those are 2 guys you're going to find.
But do you realize in the last 2 draft mocks we've had 4 edge rushers go in the first round? 4.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yes.
Right.
I mean, I have never seen that before, and it could be more.
There have been years when more than 4 have gone in the first round. If we're just about sheer numbers, but
when?
It's happened a couple of times. I'll give me a second, and I'll tell you what 2000 and
time's up. You had a second.
2005, I believe there was 5. There's been a few times there was 5. And so in terms of sheer numbers, there's been 5 a few times. But in terms of quality, it's hard to top Peppers and Freeney back to back.
It's very tough.
I'm typing record defensive ends drafted first round record, because it's the internet. You can do that. I'm waiting for this to refresh. Let's see here. Or maybe I should use my phone, because this is not cooperating. There it is. Ranking every first round pick, the recent history of defensive linemen selected first, greatest defensive players, how many defensive linemen get drafted in round 1 of 2020 draft. There's not really a tally here, so no one really knows.
Well, there've been a few years when there was 5. Because I remember there's a few years when there was 5.
Name
We're talking about numbers. I just told you I named 1. There's more than those. I named at least 1, but there's more than that. There's more than that number. There's probably 3 or 4 if I would really start digging. So let's think about this.
William Hill had the over/under on defensive lineman draft last year at 4.5.
Yeah, I mean it'll probably be around that number
Because I think it's going to be 5 this year.
You can see that.
I think it's going to be 5.
I could see that.
It says since 2010, a total of 72 defensive linemen total. Now I saw only edge rushers have been selected in the first round of the NFL draft. The most recent defensive lineman to be taken number 1 was, of course, Myles Garrett. And here it says Jadeveon Clowney, chosen by the Houston Texans in 2014, is the only other player beside Garrett at the position to be selected with the first overall pick during that span. And so last year's draft produced the most when a total of 10 defensive linemen were taken in the opening round. Wow. Okay. Now to make this project that we will see half as many taken in the first round this year. They were actually talking about last year. All right. Because there was Chase Young, of course. And then we had Derek Brown. But Derek Brown was also arguably more of a defensive tackle. So, yeah. And then we had Chase Young.
Right. And so if you're counting like 3-4 outside linebacker types as well as defensive.
Actually, I'm not. That's a good point. I'm not. I'm talking, and I'm glad you brought that up. I'm talking about classic finger into the ground defensive ends.
Okay.
That's what I'm talking about. I'm glad you brought that up.
Well, that's what I was trying to confirm.
Yeah.
Because that's the problem with using terms like edge is that Lawrence Taylor and guys like that and, DeMarcus Ware get into the discussion. So if you're just talking about defensive
I'm glad you brought that up too. See, I have an issue with the term edge. You know why?
I do too. I don't like it.
No, I don't like it either because because outside linebackers themselves, they're not necessarily just going to be rushing the passer. That just really depends on the formation, like a 4-3 or a 3-4. Like, I mean, for instance, Derek Brooks, like he was an outside linebacker and he didn't exactly rush the passer as much. I mean, if he was, then you would have a much higher sack total.
The reason why I have the issue regarding the term edge has to do with the old style classic way that I'm used to thinking about defensive ends. And defensive ends basically set the edge and they keep you from running. They establish the running back's perspective. They establish control over preferably the 8-hole or the 9-hole, depending on which way you're running, and that sets the edge. I am not used to my outside linebackers setting the edge. I'm used to my outside linebackers playing cleanup and blitzing. That's me. Now I know other people like to use their linebackers in a different way that I'm not cotton to. That's me. Bill, what do you say?
Well, I mean, that's what the whole thing with the elephants, right? The Willie McGinnis and all that bunch.
Fred Dean.
Yeah, there's a whole bunch of them.
Yeah.
And
Fred Dean was amazing.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely.
Died of COVID, don't forget.
Quite right. Man.
Correct.
Yeah.
And so those guys, what these called drop-ins, back in the old days. But those guys would indeed set the edge. They'd be the end man on the line of scrimmage. And they would do defensive end things and then occasionally, very occasionally, drop into coverage. You know what? Just Willie McGinnis dropping into coverage a whole lot because, one, it didn't make sense. Wasn't a great use of resources. But every once in a while, as a surprise, as a changeup, and he has a couple of career interceptions.
Who else did that? Remember Tony Ely with Carolina?
Sure.
Yeah.
Adelius Thomas. I mean,
they did that with him. They did that. I almost lost my lunch. It's like, what the heck? He dropped back.
If I recall, Ely's not playing in the CFL.
I'm sorry, Vinny, what were you saying?
Ely's now playing for the Argonauts in the CFL.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. So I mean, overall,
Cameron Wake, even very occasionally, would go into the sort of hook curl zone area, but it wasn't something you would see him do a lot. So you were asked about years when there are 5 defensive ends chosen okay. So we have 2003 where Terrell Suggs, Ty Warren, Michael Haynes, Jerome McDougal, and Tyler Brayton. That's 5. All went.
Okay. I think
there's other years, but that's one of them.
I think this year is going to equal that or better.
Oh, I agree. I think you are correct in that.
And the reason why I say that is not just for any points or anything. I'm just fascinated with how fast this class is.
Right.
You know,
Now, some of
It's very
that
fascinating.
can be attributed. Right. Some of that obviously can be attributed to the fact that they're, in addition to the timing surfaces being different and the timing setups being different, one of the main reasons that guys are faster at their pro days is they're in a comfortable environment, they're well rested. There's a reason that the home team gets an advantage, right? That you're not in this strange place being poked and prodded and being kept up till midnight talking to teams and then told to run the most important 40 of your life.
I think even if we were at a combine,
these guys would be good athletes under any circumstances, but they wouldn't be putting up these times.
I think they would.
No.
And the reason why I say that, I assert that is because, and I want to do.
Historical studies have been done about pro days versus combine times. Pro days are not always, but on the vast majority of times faster.
But my point, I'm not concerned about that. My assertion is that athletically, this group is better. And what I'm getting at is we don't discuss enough or have a gauge of how athletes are improved. For example, it's very logical that the defensive ends of the 60s are not as fast as the defensive ends of the 80s, in the 90s, or the aughts, right? We say that. But my point is we don't gauge on a year basis when we have that nice little point of change where we can say, hey, these guys are better than they were 5 years ago or faster.
Well, okay.
The reason why I'm so funny about that, Bill, to continue my point, is I'm really getting tired of seeing schemes both on offense and defense which are designed without respect to the speed of the player. So logically on offense, considering the speed of the receivers, considering the athleticism of the quarterbacks, we should see formations that are more spread out and that reflect their speed. But you have teams like the Raiders pushing their guys and bunching them together with nary a thought. There's no thought to time motion studies or anything. It's all completely idiotic.
Yeah, and they also have been very resistant to studying certain things about how football is changing, including including getting faster at positions where you can no longer just afford to toss out guys that you just like because they're your kind of guy.
The media does that too. The media does it all the time.
Sure, but but the media doesn't get fired if you lose.
That's true. That is true. I see it in both sides.
What? If I'm saying, if I'm putting together a football team, I can't be concerned with what the media is throwing out. I have to look at how football's played nowadays, and they, when you're taking guys like Cleveland Farrell, you're taking guys like Damon Arnett. It's unfair almost to them. In addition to it hamstrings you when your guys are below the median level athletes at their position. It constrains you. It is a constraint upon what you can do as an offense or as a defense when you are below the median level in athletic ability at multiple positions. So even if, let's look at a sort of a little brief case study. The Cardinals clearly value being above the median level in terms of speed at almost every position.
Wait, did you say brief?
I said
Bill, question.
Yeah.
Question. You say like a brief case study, like you have a briefcase and you open it up?
I'm saying that
or did you mean
in order to get to bed at some reasonable hour is what I'm saying. If you just were to look at the Cardinals and how they compare athletically to the median at their position, they're above the middle point, the median line in almost every position. If you just go through their entire roster. And then you look at the Raiders where, Waller is like 94th percentile at his position. He's super athletic. And Carr is like 68th percentile. He's a very good athlete at quarterback. And you can sort of go through it. But a lot of their guys are at or below the median level. They are not a super athletic football team as a whole. And can you get away with that if you do certain things? Sure, but it's extra work, right? There's extra things that go into making up for the fact that your team is, athletically speaking, below the median level, below average as a team, athletically. And it's almost like a badge of honor, it seems, with like they're almost proud of it. Like when you hear them talking about it, well, he's just all those classic things. He's just a tough guy. He's a football player. Well, that's cool and but they say stuff like that. I'm not making it up, Zennie.
Oh, you're not.
I know they say it. Some of them still say it, but at the same time, times change. And listen, it's not the 70s anymore. It's not the 80s, not the 90s, or the 2000s, or even the 2010s. The game's always changing, and people need to adapt.
Yep,
that's the fact of the matter. And if they can't understand, they can't see that. Well, they're going to be out of a job, and they'll be wondering why.
So, in that context, where would you put the Raiders' scouting department, guys?
I'd say.
Okay. First, let me be fair. I think they're hamstrung to some extent. So I'm going to defend them a teeny bit. I get the feeling that from the top, there's these not weird, but they have these cultural dictates, I think is the way I put it, where we value this more than that. And so they say, go get me this as opposed to getting me that. And if it works, you look like geniuses because you're going in the other direction from where everyone else is going.
Now to Henry Ruggs?
Well, right. Now, Ruggs is obviously one of the guys who's, once again, like a 94th percentile guy. They have a couple of those. Waller, Ruggs. That might be the list. I have to think hard. There might be somebody else who's like a super athlete at their position, but they don't have a bunch of them, though.
Josh Jacobs comes close.
Who'd you say?
Josh Jacobs comes close.
No. Not according to his athletic testing, he isn't. I mean, he's dead on average in most things, and below average in a couple. So
wait, what is he below average in?
A bunch of things. Well, like his 40 time is being the most obvious, but his 3-cone and shuttle was just dead on average for the position. He wasn't really super above average in anything. I'm trying to think of. He's a powerful little dude. I think his broad jump was above average. His vertical was right at average. And I think his bench numbers might have been slightly above average. But everything else is either at or below average.
So you're basically saying he's playing above his weight?
I'm saying that he's the kind of running back that, first of all, I wouldn't have taken him in the first round, but he's the kind of running back that can be very productive. The good thing is they do know how to use him, right?
But you said you wouldn't have. You'd put your cards on the table. You said you would not have taken him.
He's not a first round player to me.
Wow, for the reasons you said.
For some of the reasons I said, and I also believe that he's. Obviously with running backs, you don't always think long term, but he's not the kind of guy who I think is going to be a 7-8 year running back. I think he's a 3 to 5 year running back, which is okay, I guess nowadays. People think that way at the running back position anyway, I suppose.
I don't think you have a 7 or 8 year running back today anyway.
There's a few of them, but they're clearly not the norm. A guy who I'm willing to sort of put my mark on who's going to be a 7-8 year top tier running back and start to drop off right at that point is, say, Jonathan Taylor. Now it helps he's behind a great offensive line, but he's also a special athlete. Right? That's the kind of guy I would take in the first round. If I'm taking a first round running back, I want a guy who's 92nd percentile here, 94th percentile there, 97th, 89th. Like the low numbers, like 88, 89. Like he's boom, 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 boom. Top tier athlete. That's Jonathan Taylor. That's not Josh Jacobs.
Well, I say, but 7 or 8 year running back.
They are the exception, not the rule, obviously. But I'm saying that that's not how Jacobs is built or constructed, right? Taylor is a guy who is.
What I'm getting at is the pattern of play and the level of hitting athleticism on defense, in my opinion, prevents the success of a running back, or prevents the probability, a certain probability that a running back will last beyond 6 years.
Oh, sure. They'll be right. That's why I said. That's why I use the word exceptional, Zennie. That's why I use the word exceptional, because they'll be the exception, not the rule. Exceptions are the stat. They are exceptions. these are guys that can do things that the other guys can't do.
I'm aware of that, but my point is that given the way the game is going, that exception is getting smaller.
Right.
The game's growing, but yet it's important that the game's growing, but yet all the outside forces want to just keep it exactly the same, which is always kind of funny about it.
Yeah, and that's why I picked on a guy that I believe in. Right. I don't believe in a bunch of running backs. I believe in a couple that literally like a couple have that opportunity, that ability. Adrian Peterson's not coming through that door anymore, right? I mean, guys who has a decade as a top 10 running back is, O.J. Simpson. Those guys aren't walking through the door anymore. Guys who are great for an 8, 9, 10-year period.
Hey,
Be willing to really,
Hey, Vince, what's your view?
My personal view when it comes to running backs,
Yeah.
I would say now when it comes to running backs, we've really, similar to how we changed the way we look at a fullback. Like you see, now when we look at fullbacks, it's not really that common. Whenever you see a fullback now, it's something like a Kyle Juszczyk. But when it comes to running backs, I'm seeing a bit of a change here too, because for many, many years, people just valued running backs as just run the ball. But, you had some early instances of Chuck Foreman or Roger Craig, people that could try to do a bit of both, run and catch. But ever since we've seen situations of people haven't really been taking running backs in the first round, we're taking a bit later because they're seen as more people noticing that running backs themselves, they tend to get injured a lot more frequently, so they're much more reluctant to be taking those big contracts. Also been noticing that, when they usually do take guys outside of someone like a Derrick Henry, usually they're valuing the guys that can do a bit of both run and catch.
Yep.
So that's why someone like Christian McCaffrey was so influential for the Panthers, because he literally was their entire offense. He could run the ball and catch the ball, and that's very valued in today's NFL, which relies more on the passing game as opposed to the running game. And not saying that there weren't any great, passers back in the day. I mean, you go back to the 1920s even to see someone like Laverne Dilwig, who I'm a big soft spot for the Hall of Fame, or even someone like Don Hudson, for instance, who obviously is. But even then, that was also a different day. But now we've greatly increased our usage of the passing game, and that's why these multi-purpose running backs have been much more frequent. And if they're not, and the ones that aren't, well, we use them for a few years, and because they're not emphasized as much, we generally don't see them last long in the NFL.
And even going back, I mean, old aches and pains, Ollie Matson was a great receiver out of the backfield. Lenny Moore was a great receiver out of the backfield. It's not there's no new ideas in football. Really.
It's not a new idea. There's no new ideas. They've just been using some of them more often now. Lenny Moore was definitely different for his time.
Yeah, what happens is ideas get repackaged, repurposed, and revived, right? I mean, you can find a lot of these concepts. I can find Tulsa, or things of Marymount College or what.
I disagree with that for one particular reason, guys. The vertical. So this is something I was talking with, and I got a call to see how he's doing. Now former Cal offensive coordinator Tony Franklin about when I had him on the show, and which I had a lot of fun. I got to have him back. We're talking about vertical set blocking, and vertical set blocking is something that wasn't around in the 60s as a fully developed technique. Mm-hmm. But it didn't start really until the late 70s and really the late 80s under Hal Mummy and those guys, okay? So
which isn't still that doesn't really qualify as that new nowadays. I mean, he was doing that stuff at Iowa Wesleyan when he had Mike Leach as a graduate assistant. But you know what I mean? So that's not that new. And Dana Holgerson was a scrappy receiver.
New, but you actually classified it as new by your statement. It's new because he was the only person that was doing it. And not only that, the techniques that were formed. Hold on a second. I gotta mute my.
Well, anything that happened when Dana Holgerson still had hair, I have trouble calling new. But I guess I understand what Zennie's saying.
You guys talk for a second. I got to.
That's what we're doing. Yeah.
Yeah, we are talking.
That's what we're doing. So
yeah, I've been checking some of this stuff out. I always know that it's the same thing when it comes to media, for instance. Like, for instance, radio is still around, but you see now podcasting is basically a revival of, radio waves opposed to a visual. That's basically one example. Like, you bring something back. I mean, it's repurposed and whatnot. And that just goes for everything. Like, look at the ABA. Look at the ABA, for instance. That was much more of a shooting. That was much of a pure shooter kind of the league. And now you're seeing the NBA itself being much more shoot.
Right, looking and acting more like the ABA, just as the NFL, by the late 1970s, early 1980s, was starting to look and act more like the AFL had 15 years previously. So when I say there's nothing truly new under the sun, I'm not so much saying that there are people innovating constantly. I'm not saying there's not new things happening, but I'm saying that all those things are rooted in something that someone has already tried to do, with varying levels of success in the past, obviously. People talked about the run and shoot as a failure, but it can't truly be a failure if its concepts are now woven into literally every offense in the NFL, and a lot of college offenses use run and shoot concepts, even if they are not running the run and shoot. Almost no one is, with the exception of maybe some high schools and a few colleges, and a very few colleges are running full-on run and shoot, right? I mean, even June Jones kind of tweaked it. He moved away from pure run and shoot, and some of these places, where they have tight ends on the roster and they're doing certain things that are a little bit different. The old original Tiger Ellison, we always talk about Miles Davis, but he stole or was given, or whatever term you want to use, this stuff that came from Tiger Ellison, who had done a bunch of old lonesome polecat stuff before that. He had a small bunch of guys. Once again, innovation. If you ever read Doug Farrar's book, Genius of Desperation, he's a guy who's at a high school where his kids are smaller than the kids they're playing against. It's that simple. Like, these other schools are bigger. I can't muscle these guys, and everyone's running some variant of the power I at the time, pretty much. Late 1950s, if you're not running wing T, you're running some version of power I. And he realizes that neither of those two things are really well suited to the kids he has. And so he originally comes up with run and shoot to make it easier to run the ball, right? So the line splits and all these other things he's doing is to make it harder for the defense to flow to the football. So he gets rid of the lead fullback. He gets rid of a bunch of these things that are essentially telling people where the ball is going, right? And instead makes it so you have to defend, maybe not the entire width of the field, but way more width of the field. And then he realizes, as people have very much realized, especially now we talk about analytics, that all these things he was doing originally to make it so his undersized offensive linemen could get angles on defensive linemen as opposed to getting thrown back into the backfield. He also realized, it's way easier to pass the ball too. That was almost by accident, right?
Yeah, definitely.
Because, it's 1958. Everyone's worried about running the ball, but he realizes, we can pass the ball way better too. And
it's really funny. It's really funny that, I see all these history things at the NFL. All they do is just talk about the 70s and the 80s. Like, that's when the NFL was founded. Like, it's just so foolish. Like, these guys say that they're always the experts, and yet for some reason I'm someone like you've probably seen some of them. Haven't you? Which ones have you seen that kind of fit my description?
I mean, there are some of them that go back further, but
like Chris Willis is the one that comes to mind.
But they don't run them as often. You can find even some that show, slinging Sammy Baugh versus Cyanide Sig Luckman, but those don't run as often, right? They ran one, and they don't run it as often as they used to, but they ran one for a while where Peyton hung out with Sammy Baugh. Oh, it was cool as heck. And, a couple of times Sammy kind of put Peyton in his place because he made it clear, like, what you're doing is cool and everything, but when's the last time you tackled somebody? When's the last time you did such and such? Because Sammy Baugh, for the first half of his career, was one of the best safeties in football.
He was also a great punter, too.
Right, I was going to say, and led the league in punting a couple of times.
So just curious, who actually started the whole thing with, punting? I know that, Horace Gillum was a huge innovator of punting back in the AAFC. That's another special team I won. But who really innovated it? Who was the one that truly made punting a thing in professionals?
Well, I mean, punting, was a thing after the first few rule changes in the game. I mean, punting predates the line of scrimmage, right? I mean, so I don't know how deep you want to go down this rabbit hole, but I guess we're heading down it. So in the earliest versions of the game we now call, American tackle football, you weren't allowed to run with the ball at first. And then the first big innovation was being able to pick up the ball and run with it. That was the first big leap forward. But even then, the sport was ugly for the most part, slow, and incredibly brutal.
Killed a lot of people. That's why Teddy Roosevelt changed it a lot.
Right. So his son got hurt playing football, and lots of people's sons got hurt playing football. His son, I think, was at Harvard at the time, and had like a dislocated shoulder and a big gash on his head and whatever. And you have to remember that this as a time when football is, for the most part, played primarily at our most prestigious universities, right?
That's where it really started. Like, a lot of people want to keep pretending and say that, oh, Canton's the birth. No, it's not. And if you actually focus on the real history of like the Hall of Fame itself, it was actually very close to happening in Latrobe, Pennsylvania, where John Bralier is. But you have people like John. You know about John Terry? Do you know that guy's name? Mm-hmm. What do you think of him?
I mean, it's like anything else that comes from.
No, what do you think of him? What do you think of John Terry?
The person?
Yes.
Huh.
Be honest. Don't worry.
Complex, multi-layered, multifaceted, not always good. There's a mix of things in there.
I can tell you my personal opinion on him. Okay. He really, really, really hates people. And he always generally, like, even when I say a question, he's very condescending, like, seriously, like, dude, sure. I'm 21 years old. And all he does is boast about how much he knew at my age. Like, okay, it's the 21st century. I'm not in that area anymore. And I said, you want to say about participation trophies? It was your generation that gave them to us. So, yeah, stick it up. So, but when it comes to, like, a lot of those, like, I don't know, it's one of those kind of people that kind of, like, get on my nerves.
Sure.
Have you seen any of those cover? I know this is like, I know this is live, but at the same time, like, I'm still mentioning this to you. So yeah.
Sure.
But outside of that, like, he does have some interesting stuff.
Sure. So one of the things about a lot of the early punting records is you have to remember, obviously, as we already established, rosters were very small.
Of course, they were tiny. Like, you oftentimes had just coaches, like, they were just also the players as well.
Yeah. Mass substitution was quite literally illegal, right? You weren't allowed to do mass substitution. And teams used to try to find ways around it, including, having guys fake injury, whatever, all kinds of things you do to try to sub guys in. So mass substitution is flat out illegal. Right? So you're talking about an era when rosters are 25 or fewer players.
It's tiny.
Yeah, that's what I'm telling you. It's less than half of the modern roster.
Tiny.
Yes, you're talking about a time when almost every single player is a two-way player, especially in the early part of their careers. Sometimes when a guy got older, they would, say, hey, you don't have to play defense anymore. Or if it's a guy who's primarily a defensive player, you'd say, hey, you don't have to play running back anymore. Whatever it is, we've got a guy who's better at it than you anyway. Now, you could just play. But that was usually towards the back end of your career. The last couple of years before you were put out to pasture, they might only have you play one way. But, early part of almost any player's career, they're playing both ways until really, well into the 50s, or at least the early part of the 50s. And you still saw a good number of two-way players. I mean, Frank Gifford was a two-way player for the first part of his career. George Blanda even was a two-way player in the early part of his career, right? So,
of course, I know about that.
Right. So it took a while before, E.J. Beast Holub was one of the last AFL players to be a really great two-way player. And then obviously on the NFL side, Ben Narek, though he wasn't.
E.J. Holub was amazing.
Yeah, he should be in the Hall of Fame as well.
Oh yeah, I agree. I spoke to actually, someone that was like in his 90s that talked about how amazing EJ Hall was, as both the linebacker and a center, and like just talking with him was just like really like is basically like reading open a history book and being taught a history lesson, which is pretty remarkable.
Yeah. I mean, there's a few of these guys are still alive, and we need to recognize them and celebrate them and everything like that. So
yeah, definitely. I do find going back what I was saying with the attorney, he was for some reason saying how for some reason, I don't know why, but I was mentioning, Heffelfinger and Braley and Fowles, the trio of the early NFL, before the NFL. And for some reason, he claims that the hall itself is it's not to honor who grew the game, it's to honor the best there is. But I would say you can stretch those words out as much as you want, buddy. Like, can't you say, like, I mean, it's not like Heffelfinger was a scrub. It wasn't like Fowles was a scrub. It wasn't like Braley was a scrub. Those were, like, literally the best of the best of the best. I mean, Fowles was.
I was going to say that it's a both thing, obviously. These were not just – there were lots of players that helped to grow the game, but weren't great. These are guys that did both.
Yeah, they did both.
Great player.
Jason Cole said, this is stupid too. Jason Cole said about Heffelfinger, he just signed a check. How insulting. This guy votes for the Hall of Fame, and he didn't even know who Charles Fowles was until I told him.
Well, that's very disappointing and upsetting even.
Oh, it's extremely upsetting, especially when you realize that, Heffelfinger aged a lot better than he did.
But yeah, I mean, so when you look at, and that's the whole thing. It once again such a different era, and there was so little money. If you're a college educated man, you weren't playing football for money. You could make way more doing a whole long list of things. When college, you remember we're talking about, if you're talking about turn of the century or before the turn of the century, college education was extremely unusual. Like, that's a rare thing. Like, a very small percentage of the American population was college educated.
That seems like unheard of, especially as a college student.
Yeah, it was right. It was much like it was a scare.
Bourgeoisie kind of like,
Yeah, college education was, if you weren't, especially in like smaller communities, if you were in a big city, there'd be a decent number of college educated people. I mean, not a much lower percentage than now, obviously, but a decent number. But if you're in a smaller town, you might be one of 2 or 3 people in the whole town with a college education. So the professional opportunities for someone with a college education in the 1890s and 19 teens and 20s were radically different from now.
Extremely.
Well, think about this. College education was not required to teach high school in many places until after World War II. So there are many places where someone had a high school education and then had gone for a year or sometimes 2 years to a quote unquote normal school to become a school teacher. Yeah, that's
normal school.
Right. That's what it's called. So that's where you went to become a teacher in the old days. And it wasn't a full college education. It was, it was sort of like the modern equivalent would be like an advanced certification, basically. And it would be a 1 or 2 year program. And you would be done and be going off to teach. If you wanted to teach at the college level, you did need to have a college education, preferably a master's, but not even all the time that.
What they usually have then, like,
if you were teaching at the college level, you had at least a bachelor's, and in many cases a master's. But doctorates were extremely rare in the teens, 20s, even the 30s. In the 40s, that number began to go up. So there would be people who were presidents of the universities who had master's degrees in the 20s and 30s, and even in the 40s. So obviously, professors wouldn't be expected to have much more than that. So it took a while for things to change. It wasn't really until, like I said, really World War II. First of all, if you remember, World War II radically changed the United States in a bunch of different ways, including college education because of the GI Bill. So now, even though college was much more affordable in those days, but the other thing that came along with it, you didn't just get the opportunity to go to college because somebody's paying for your college education. you also didn't have to worry about working because of what? BAH, your basic allowance for housing, paid you essentially to go to school. So, right, exactly. And so now you could go to school and, live frugally without having to work.
Decently well, I'd say.
Frugally. I mean, if you weren't living high on the hog, but you could live.
You're getting by.
You would be getting by. You wouldn't have to work. Yes, you wouldn't have to work.
Also, because it's getting kind of late for me too, Bill.
Yep.
When do you think Zennie's gonna come back, or he's gonna done?
I don't know if Zennie's coming back.
I don't know. Anyway, just before I go, I just want to ask you, what was your favorite team growing up, by the way? Just out of curiosity.
So, and there's once again origin story. So, I'm born in Philadelphia, but I don't really grow up there. Soon after my birth, we moved to.
You said a whole lot of places. That's why I'm curious.
Yeah. So I'm trying to make this short. But I was born in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and when I'm still an infant, we moved we're Blockbusters. We're the first black family in the Hollywood Maple Halls subsection, of.
Oh, nice.
Oh, well, not so nice. Of Norfolk, Virginia. And with all the things that come along with moving into that part of the country when you're the first black family. But, my dad, once again, speaking of GI Bill, my dad had his GI Bill mortgage benefit and allowed him to buy a house. He was he was finishing up his master's degree at Temple University at the time that my parents met. She was also, so my mom was a grad student in political science. My dad was a grad student in English. And and they were introduced by the Maps. Miles and Yvonne Mapp introduced my parents to each other. So that's why Miles Avery Mapp, the television writer and producer, I guess also, is my godbrother because his parents introduced my parents to each other. So moving forward, then my father decides to pursue his PhD. We moved to Chapel Hill, North Carolina, because he's been accepted there. So the first sports events that I see with my little eyes are University of North Carolina football and basketball games. So that's I imprint sort of there with that in terms of collegiate sports. And then in terms of pro sports, what's on television? Well, Washington is broadcast that area. Carolina doesn't have a franchise yet. But Atlanta's far enough away that we don't get their games. So that was my initial imprintation. And I remember very clearly on my 5th birthday, the CBS game, because CBS carried the AFC games. So the CBS game, and I think that's correct. In those,
are you sure it wasn't? Like let me just check. I think at that time,
I might have reversed it in my.
No. At that time, I think it was. I think CBS could have had. I'm not too sure. No. CBS had the. CBS had the NFC. NBC had the AFC.
That's what it was. It was an NBC game. So it's my 5th birthday, and there's an afternoon game that comes on during my birthday party, and I was already a huge football fan, so I had a football-shaped cake, and I asked if, in addition to whatever's going on at the party, if I could also watch the game. It's my birthday, and my parents say yes. So in this game, the Raiders go up about 3 scores, like maybe 20 points or something like that, on the Steelers, and are just beating them up. And then the Steelers stage a furious comeback, win the game like 28-26, something like that. I'm going off my 48 years ago memories. But I just sort of fell in love with them for a bunch of reasons. They're crazy fans, and their fans truly were colorful. I mean, you don't see that anymore. And partially because working class people don't really go to football games like that anymore. But it was I hope you get to see some of those little NFL films things about.
Oh, I've seen it. I love John Facenda's voice. Okay, that's always really cool.
Well, and so you get to see Myron Cope inventing the terrible towel and all that good stuff. But yeah,
Terrible towel.
Yeah, exactly. So at the time, once again, you're a small child. The Raiders seem to represent everything bad. Like they played somewhere between dirty and almost felonious at the time. And
this is
I
gonna be pretty bad.
remember watching a game one time when Howard Cosell referred to the Raiders, and here I quote, "the NFL's criminal element." Remember that game, Zenny? Did you watch that game when Cosell referred to them as the NFL's criminal element?
Was that happened in the middle of an actual lawsuit involving both the Raiders and the Steelers, in which both teams were accusing the other of having criminal elements on them. So Howard wasn't just saying that; he was saying that because that was brought up as part of a lawsuit. Yeah,
but they were truly a renegade franchise, and the way they played, man, wow. And once again, I mean, the game was so very different, but the things I saw, Atkinson and Tatum and Banaszak and all those guys do to people,
well,
so you grew up as a Raiders fan too?
No, quite the opposite.
And the thing about it is that I didn't like football originally. In fact, my late grandfather, when I was 7, said that I should play football, and I said I'm not going to do that because there are no blacks coaching. And at 7 years old, I recognized that it had the look of slavery, and I didn't like it.
Right.
So I had nothing to do with football. I was interested in Star Trek, and my favorite character was Mr. Spock. I was interested in science fiction and the Quester tapes and Lost in Space and the Fantastic Voyage. You remember
Fantastic?
I know about them. I know about them.
Yeah, where they miniaturized.
Yes. Right.
Then, of course, there was
the delightful homemade special effects of the era. I remember them.
It's still very impressive for the time.
Yes.
Voyage to the Bottom of the Sea and the Sea View.
Yep.
On Irwin Allen's movie, all that stuff. And then, of course, lest we forget, Godzilla.
Of course.
So all that consumed my time. I paid no attention to sports. And then when I wasn't paying attention to that in school, of course, I was reading about urban planning from a book written by a guy named Hans Blumenfeld in 1968, who made a reference to Epcot in Disney. And I found this book at Crocs and Bertano, which was then this high-end bookstore in Chicago.
Yep.
Called The Art of Walt Disney by Christopher Jenks. And I only wanted it for one reason. At the back of it, a very expensive, very thick book that cost $31 at the time. I couldn't afford it, but my mom, my grandmother bought it for me. No, my mother bought it for me. My grandmother bought Cosmos. But anyway, at the back of it, there was a chapter called "Lessons of the Parks." It was about how the had the design strategies and structures and forced perspective that came to frame Disneyland, particularly Main Street, could be used in real cities, and then that led to another part of the same chapter, which introduced Epcot, experimental prototype of tomorrow, as it was actually intended to be, which is what I read. And in those days, Vinny, we didn't have the internet to do any more research.
Of course, that was more like a '90s thing that really got big.
It was probably what any kid of the era did if they were interested in something. You had that one book or two you read again and 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 again, and you made drawings of it because that's all you had. and you thought about it. That's what I did in my room. I had 600 books and magazines. I didn't have the internet.
Hmm.
And that fully formed my worldview, so that by the time we came to California, and in 1975, my mom befriended a man named Otis Sistrunk with the Oakland Raiders. I had nothing.
Where were you before? Where were you before California?
Chicago. We left Chicago. We lived at 79. We lived at 79. I grew up at 7427 Wentworth.
Oh wow, I know exactly where that is.
Yeah, and then we moved to 7908B South Kimbark.
Oh,
Hmm.
okay. I
And
know exactly where that is.
I was at Avalon Elementary, and then one Saturday at about 11:35 in the morning, I walked across Kimbark, past the dry cleaner, through the alley to go to this hamburger place that was across the street from the Sears to get a hamburger to take back, and I was held up and robbed by 5 guys that I went to Avalon Park Elementary School with. I knew all of them.
Jeez. This is ridiculous. Sorry.
Because I knew all of them, I went back. I called Mom, who was working at United that day. I told her what happened. My mom had separated from and divorced my dad in '67. And saved my life. If I hadn't have done that, if they hadn't have done that, I would have died. Just because of the emotion of the stuff. Anyway, so they called the police. Police rounded them all up, and they made them all apologize to me.
That's good.
And so I went to the principal one day and said, I can't learn at your school because everybody wants to fight. That was Avalon. So they had me tested. I tested at 156. The tester couldn't believe that my score was that high and told me so to my face, and had me in the plot to have me retested. And so the second test was 131. You know,
It's good.
nervous, all that. So you take the average, whatever. But I didn't like the pretense under which it happened. In other words, I can't believe you're that smart.
Yeah.
No possible way a black guy could, a kid.
Heard that before.
Yes.
Intelligence is worldwide. You don't have to be black, white, anywhere you want.
It's called racism, okay? Racism
Of course.
is the mental illness of our time. And it was big time back then as it is now. At any rate.
Of course.
Arguably worse. But at any rate, because we didn't have cell phone cameras to catch all the atrocities that are undeniably going on at the time.
They were always going around.
Okay? But at any rate, because of that, my mom was going to send me to a lab school. I was going to turn out to be like some sort of weird weirdo because I went with normal people. So California because they had the best schools.
Mm-hmm.
My father was out there, so we moved out to Oakland. That's how I wound up in Oakland.
Mm.
And so Mom had befriended Otis Sistrunk. At the time, she called me downstairs to meet him. I didn't want to come down. I was so into Star Trek, twice every evening in Oakland at 5 o'clock and then 6 o'clock on Channel 2 at the time. Okay, I had big posters. My room was adorned with Star Trek. I was in love with Latuna Uhura for some obvious reasons. So
very, very, very trailblazing show for the time, of course.
And so here's Mr. Sistrunk, and so I said, "Hey, Mr. Sistrunk, how you doing? I'm Zennie." I said, "Do you have a Nikon camera?" Because I had a Nikon. He goes, "No." I said, "Do you know anything photography?" He said, "I don't know." And I said, "Oh," I said, "Do you watch Star Trek?" He goes, "No." And so I kind of was dumbfounded. I said, "Well, it's nice to meet you." Right back upstairs, I had, and then I figured, out of fairness to my mom, that if he was going to be a guest, a visitor, and they weren't dating, they were real as a friend, I maybe should get to know something about him. So I found in the bookstore this book called The NFL's Encyclopedic History of Professional Football, and he was in it. But what caught my eye and caused me to think entirely differently about football was a back chapter called Encyclopedic History of no, excuse me, Strategic History of Professional Football.
Mm-hmm.
And there was a section, the photograph of Tom Landry, and how Tom Landry had brought feedback and control theory from engineering and applied it to football. That singular paragraph that I recite to you today is what caused me to get interested in football. The fact that someone could take engineering concepts and apply them to football in the form of the flex defense, and then create the idea of deception using pre-ships in multiple offense. I was talking about, they had these neat graphics, which really define how I draw my plays today. So if anybody looks at in my videos where I'm drawing a play, the center is always a square. The offensive linemen are circles. The triangles are defensive linemen. The squares are also linebackers on defense, and the circles are defensive backs. That all came from that book. So that was like lightning hitting my brain.
Important book, I see.
And that's what started it. And then Otis was giving us tickets to Raider games, and I had an optometrist, Dr. Howard Rose, who sat in section 209, row 24, seat 12. Went to visit him. Actually, section 204, row 29, seat 12. I stand corrected. Okay. And then I started going to Raider games fairly regularly, and that's really where it started.
As for me, it's a little bit of a different story.
But I was a Cowboys fan, and I subscribed to the Dallas Cowboys Weekly. The reasons I told you. And so, the other reason I was a big Cowboys fan is something that Bill may remember. Dallas. I mean, J.R. Ewing. Okay. And Sue Ellen and Patrick Duffy, who played Bobby.
Yep.
That whole crew. And see, at the time, Dallas was just becoming a big deal. It was in history, Dallas was developing, or a major city that was beneficiary of something called Sunbelt development, because manufacturers beset with bad winters and then growing international competition, particularly from Japan.
And let's also mention the lack of or weakness of union organizing in those states, as opposed to the traditional Rust Belt states, which had very established unions,
which allowed for labor in the South.
Correct.
Among other things, dramatic shift, which Dallas benefited from, and also that was on top of the burgeoning oil industry. All right, by the late 70s and the 80s, Dallas was just whoo, and the Cowboys were part of that. So the Cowboys are also known as America's team for the cheerleaders and all that. And so for my birthday on August 4th birthday, my mom took me to the Dallas Cowboys Pittsburgh Steelers Thursday night game, that 1979 game, which I believe was on the 12th of that month, if memory serves, at a hot 91-degree night at Texas Stadium. That was my first Cowboys game. And I have this photograph from the end zone, because we were on the end zone. The Cowboys, actually, what happened was, prior to that, I wrote a letter to the Cowboys asking what the keys were for Bob Brunig in the flex defense. And I wrote Ernie Stautner, who's the defensive coordinator.
Yes.
To my surprise.
Stautner.
To my surprise.
A great player himself, too, but yeah.
To my surprise, they wrote me back, thanking me for the letter and inviting me to visit the office. Since Mom worked for United Airlines, and I was able, she let me travel for free, which I traveled for free. Have you heard the story, Bill?
Yes.
Okay.
I've never heard this story. But I want to mention my own story too. That's okay.
Vinny, I'm not done.
Okay.
All right.
Okay, keep talking.
I went down there for the day. I stayed at Reunion Hotel. It was then new. And when I arrived, I walked up to 6160. Well, drove up. When I drove up, took a shuttle from the hotel to 6160 North Central Expressway. That was the Cowboys' old headquarters. They were on the 11th floor. Bill, will you stop yawning?
No.
God, that's rude.
It's not rude. Look, I've been up for a very long time.
I know, but I'm in the middle telling I don't do that to anybody. I was like, okay. Here's the thing, right? No, it's not a good thing to do, guys.
Oh, it's not. It really isn't.
I don't do that to you guys. I know, okay? So my point is, but all right. So they put me in because the reason why this is so important is as many times, and it's particularly important for you to hear, Vinny, because you're gonna hear a lot of stories about how we're treated negatively. This is a story about how Black folks are treated positively.
Correct.
All right.
I feel like we need to have more of those.
This happened. And this happened in '79, and so they gave me the full conference room and 6 reels of film. Dallas defense versus the I formation 1. Dallas defense versus the I formation 2. Flex strong quality control. Flex weak quality control. Dallas defense reel 1. Dallas defense reel 2.
Wow.
Ernie came in and he personally set it up for me. And as I was waiting, I had a blue suit on with a white shirt and a red tie.
You remember exactly what you remember. I see you remember exactly what you wear. That tells you right away that it's a very, very important time in your life.
Having a defensive backfield meeting. Out of the meeting came Charlie Waters, Dennis Thurman, Cliff Harris, Randy Hughes, and a couple of other guys I didn't quite recognize. And they were like,
wow.
Whoa. I mean, it was like,
I'm just saying, whoa, just thinking about that too.
And I'm a kid because I'm actually going from reading the Dallas Cowboys weekly, right? Which I'm going immediately because they have the centerfold of the cheerleaders, okay? All right. But also because, I'm trying to absorb everything about the Cowboys because of the type of approach, right? And here's heroes, right? This is huge. So they got me into the room and I started running film. And one of the films spliced like that. And I went, oh no. And I'm thinking they're going to kick me out. They're going to call the police. I didn't know what to do. But I was always taught by my mom to always tell the truth. So I went up. I told her what happened. She goes, oh, it happens all the time. Don't worry. It was a big learning. I'm a teenager, okay? So it was a big learning deal for me. A brother named Gus, who's probably old enough to be mid-50s or something, came up, said, don't worry, we're going to get that for you in 5 minutes. He came back in 5 minutes. It was fixed like nothing happened.
Wow.
So then Coach Startner came in. He goes, so what did you think? And I said, yeah, Coach, I have a question. And he said, yeah. I said, it seems like because that you guys were in Brown when you were playing the Patriots. Sam Cunningham was the running back of the Patriots. He ran for 56 yards and a touchdown. What happened was that Randy White got hit by Charlie Hanna right off the block, so he couldn't get into his gap. Bob Brunick had actually turned the wrong way in the flex. Yeah. And so I diagnosed that. And I was saying, hey, I was asking Coach Starner if this was the proper way to look at it. He goes, yeah, that's right. That's how you do it.
Nice.
And so what I learned out of that, because I had the playbook, which actually was really, people would say, oh, the Cowboys playbook is complicated. It's really simple and it's really thin. It was not complicated at all. It was very easy to understand and pick up. Okay, it was all by people who just didn't even take time to look at it in the media, right? Which is typical. So anyway, and so I learned what 3 call is for the defensive line and all the terminologies like that. Okay, and what I realized is that everything is designed for instant diagnosis. So you can watch a film and basically figure out what one, you can fix it on a fly. Very genius setup. No, it was genius in its simplicity. I had a blast. I was there for 6 hours. I left at 4 o'clock.
Wow.
It was the most amazing time of my life. One of the most amazing times of my life. I'll never forget, obviously, by the time I'm recounting it. And that's how I got into football.
Pretty incredible. With me, it's a bit of a different story. You see, I did play football when I was younger, though I didn't really like it as much. Well, it didn't help when my dad was the coach. I was always, kind of one of the weaker players. I didn't really focus on football as much, or even just sports in general. Like I preferred, playing some on my PS2, like playing some, whether it be like some, some of my old whether it be Sonic the Hedgehog or like some other stuff that goes on, like Mario on my DS. Around that stuff as well, or I'd just be watching, Marvel stuff, DC stuff, generally, what a lot of people what a lot of kids my age would usually be interested in, for those that are not really into the sports. In fact, for a long time, but outside of that, and for a long time, I thought I was actually going to be an architect, mainly because I really, really loved companies. I loved stores. I wanted to try to build them. But it wasn't until I transferred schools because of a lot of issues that went on, bullying and whatnot. What's worse is that there was not even any cameras in that schools, and it's pretty brutal. But I went to this other school. It was a private school, St. John the Baptist. It was in the exact same town, and around this time I start watching a little bit of sports, just to get my mind off of things. But then I started getting really, really interested in this, and I realized that I remember when I was younger, I grew up with the Giants. Tiki Barber was always my favorite player. I always loved seeing him run. Stephon Marbury on the Knicks, David Wright on the Mets. Also remember Sean Avery on the Rangers as well. Usually I liked some of the players. I wasn't really huge into it. I liked it, but I wasn't very big into it. But it was around this time where, as someone who grew up reading a lot of Wikipedia and also even just skimming through a little bit of this stuff, I kind of already knew a certain grasp of it. And so I just started to just research more and more and more and more and more into a lot of this stuff. And I'm still doing that. I never get tired of it. I basically read Wikipedia articles, and besides Wikipedia, I always go to many other sources. It's always a starting point. I never just start and just only say Wikipedia. Like people always say, "Oh, don't maybe use it," but it's helped me out through all the years. But what really changed it for me was around it was January or February around that year, and the name of the teacher was Mr. Coulange. His name was Carl Coulange. He was the head of the media network. He was the teacher there. And he had a big Celtics poster on his door. And I was talking to him about it, you have a Celtics poster here, and why not the Knicks? And he said, I'm a Celtics fan. I love Paul Pierce, and he basically told me a little bit about it. And he noticed that there was something different about me in terms of how I really mentioned sports, how I was able to really go to heads with him, even though he was in his 30s and I was 15 years old. And he suggested, hey, I do a whole radio. We do radio here. We do some camera work. Would you like to be a part of it? And I said, yeah. And so, yeah, I credit Mr. Coulange. Carl, if you're listening, thank you again for bringing me into this, because I literally said, last year, that he is literally the reason why I have a journalism degree, because ever since then I became someone that's got more and more interested into sports. I became just an absolute fanatic, just absolute just going through all the details. And he even said that I was always the toughest one to always go ahead with sports. He's never met anyone else that was like that. And it was pretty surprising, considering that I didn't even think I would even have a career in sports, and he was the one that really brought me into it. And so I really do thank him a lot for it. He works at Suffolk Community College now. He doesn't work at St. John's anymore. But yeah, I really give him a lot of credit, because he is the reason why I'm here speaking to you right now. And in case you're curious, what also was really interesting is that St. John the Baptist, going from West Islip, it's known as a very, very white area. In fact, the nickname is actually White Islip. Not going to lie. What was interesting about St. John's is that it was surprisingly very multicultural. In fact, that was the very first time I actually had a black classmate. I've had several black classmates, and he was my first ever black teacher. And the only experience I ever had with black black people in faculty was my principal for the previous school, and he didn't really do anything with it. But he was really bad at being a principal. But here I had someone in Mr. Collins that really guided me throughout a lot of stuff. This was like a sanctuary, a home for me, where I was really healing for all the troubles I was going from high school, from my previous one to this one, and it just became a sanctuary. And yeah, that's why I'm here, and it's because of him.
Yeah.
And yeah, he's Haitian.
What position did you play when you went out for football?
I just played defensive tackle. I wasn't really that good. I never really. I was just there as just the backup kind of guy. I wasn't really that good. I didn't really like it. I also didn't like how I was. Huh?
I said, how about you, Bill?
When I first here's interesting. So the first time I ever played in my life, and it's funny, I reconnected with one of my old teammates who actually at one point was the leading receiver in the history of the Atlantic Coast Conference. Obviously, his record has since been broken. But his name was Clarkston Hines. He played for Spurrier at Duke. But as I mentioned, we lived in Chapel Hill, North Carolina.
I love that nickname.
Yes. So as I mentioned, we lived in Chapel Hill at the time. And we played for – I thought our team was called the Little Jets. Clarkson says we were called the Little Dolphins.
Little Dolphins.
Maybe he's right. I don't know. It was a very, 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 very long time ago. But I do remember our coach was named Bernie League. And my father came to watch us once, and he nicknamed Clarkston Roughneck. So Clarkston at the time, though he ended up being very thin, at the time was like a chunky kid. And then later, hit a growth spurt. But very athletic, super athletic. Like most of us are just trying to not trip over our own feet. And Clarkson looked like a football player. So he was defensive end on one side, I was defensive end on the other. And I think we might have been the two leaders on the team in tackles. Clarkston because he was great, me because everyone ran everything away from Clarkston. So that was my introduction to football. And we moved away not long after that season. So halfway through my first grade year, we moved. And I didn't really have a place to play at first, and then I started playing for the Fairlawn Rams. And when I started playing for the Fairlawn Rams, I played fullback back when they had fullbacks. I played. I
like fullbacks.
Yeah, I played some linebacker, and then eventually found my place where I finished my career playing safety. I played safety from the time I was about 15 until about 20. I walked on while I was in college. I was on the wrestling team, but I always wanted to play football. So I walked on. My friend Andre Wade and my friend Chucky all made a pact. We'd all walk on. And what Andre didn't tell me is he could really run.
His name
was broke us up, in the groups, all the walk-ons to try to figure out,
Chucky?
They're trying to figure out who's good and who sucks, basically.
Hey, Bill, his name was Chucky?
Yeah. What was Chucky's last name? Mick something. He was from Liverpool, upstate New York. And
I was going to say the UK.
Yeah, he was from upstate New York, Liverpool, and he transferred in from Central Connecticut. He'd been running back in Central Connecticut. He transferred in, and he wouldn't come in as a football player. He just transferred in, even though he'd been playing at Central Connecticut. He came to Norfolk State just as a normal student, but had the itch. So the three of us made a pact to walk on, and Andre, goes out and runs a 4.39. Now it's obviously hand timed, but that's under these circumstances, it's pretty good. And I'm like, okay, so I see what's going on here. So I thought because of my size, I'd try to see if I could, play corner instead. But when I saw what times these guys were running, it's like, nope, still a safety. So I ended up being a very deep on the bench reserve safety. I think I was about fourth or fifth string. But I was L3 on kickoff coverage. So I actually have one statistic recorded in my collegiate football career, and it's a blocked punt. I also was on punt block. So I did block a punt once. That's the only statistic I think I ever record. Well, I assisted on some tackles too. That's my only solo statistic in my entire collegiate football playing career is I blocked a punt. In a blowout. We were blowing Shaw out. which was extremely satisfying for me because a kid used to bully me when I was in like 5th grade was a kid named Sean Vaughn. And so we got to go play. It's an away game. So we're going down into North Carolina to play them. And I'm looking at their roster and I'm saying, Sean Vaughn. Well, that's not that unusual a name. I'm looking at his height and weight. He's 5'11", 245. And Sean was a big kid in 5th grade. I'm like, sure enough, it's him. And I'm like, son of a. So I was so thrilled that we crushed them. It was 26 zip. It should have been 28 zip, but we had 2 missed extra points. And I had a blocked punt that, at least helped. Like it led to a short field, and we ended up scoring a touchdown. So I was thrilled. And then after, you were doing the whole lineup, the handshake thing after the game, and I sought him out, obviously, And I was like, remember me? And he's like, no. Bullies never remember you. You always remember your bullies.
Hey, folks, we're going to have to make that the last conversation.
Yep, that's fine with me.
It is 1 o'clock.
I am exhausted.
Yeah, always good night, guys. It's always great speaking to you. I'd say stay safe, and I gotta say
in the backyard. We'll be back later this week for more shenanigans, hijinks, and good conversation.
Indeed.
yeah, always great seeing you guys. Take care.
Stick around in the background, everybody.